Good afternoon, everyone.
Sveiki, pradėsime spaudos konferenciją po Lietuvos Respublikos prezidento Gitano Nausėdos susitikimo su Europos komisijos pirmininkė Ursula von der Leyen, taip pat Estijos prezidentu Alaru Karisiu ir Latvijos prezidentu Edgaru Rinkevičiumi. Norėčiau pranešti, kad pirmiausia girdėsime visų spaudos konferencijos dalyvių pasisakymus, o paskui žiniasklaida turės galimybę užduoti klausimus. Prieš suteikdama žodį Lietuvos prezidentui norėčiau priminti, kad jo pasisakymas bus lietuvių kalba, tad prašau užsidėti ausines vertimui. Prezidente, žodis jums.
Europos komisijos pirmininkė, miela Ursula, mieli Alarai ir Edgarai, ponios ir ponai. Šiandien susitikome Vilniuje ypatingai rimtų metų Baltijos regiono saugumui. Praėjusią savaitę Lietuvos ir kitų Baltijos valstybių oro erdvėje fiksuoti dronų incidentai prie ES rytinės sienos. Tai nėra pavienės provokacijos ar atsitiktiniai įvykiai. Tai tiesioginė Rusijos agresijos prieš Ukrainą pasekmė ir dar vienas priminimas, kaip arti mūsų vyksta karas. Kartu matome vis agresyvėjančią Rusijos retoriką, koordinuotas dezinformacijos atakas ir kampanijas ir mėginimus skleisti melagingus kaltinimus Baltijos valstybėms bei kitoms NATO sąjungininkėms. Tokie veiksmai yra hibridinės agresijos dalis. Jais siekiama sėti baimę, destabilizuoti mūsų visuomenės ir testuoti Europos bei NATO ryžtą. Noriu labai aiškiai pasakyti, Baltijos valstybės neleido ir neleis savo teritorijos ar oro erdvės naudoti atakoms prieš kitas valstybės. Visi Kremliaus bandymai perkelti atsakomybę kitiems yra ciniška propaganda, skirta dėmesį nuo pagrindinio fakto nukreipti. Būtent Rusija pradėjo brutalų ir neteisėtą karą prieš Ukrainą. Todėl šiandien turime kalbėti ne apie pavienius incidentus, o apie naują saugumo realybę Europoje. Baltijos šalių dangus šiandien nėra pakankamai saugus. ES rytinė siena kasdien susiduria su vis didesniu spaudimu. Nuo dronų įsiveržimo iki elektroninio trukdymo ir iki informacinių atakų bei sabotažo grėsmių prieš kritinę infrastruktūrą. Būtent todėl šiandien Vilniuje lankosi Europos komisijos pirmininkė Ursula von der Leyen. Vertiname aiškę Europos komisijos parodytą solidarumo žinią Baltijos valstybėms. Tačiau šiandien solidarumo jau nebepakanka vien tik tai žodžiais. Europa privalo imtis greitų ir konkrečių veiksmų. Susitikime sutarėme, kad ES turi ženkliai stiprinti rytinio flango saugumo užtikrinimą. Turime kuo greičiau gyvendinti iniciatyvą Eastern Flank Watch, kurie apima oro stebėsenos, antidroninių sistemų, oro gynybos, karinio mobilumo ir situacijos stebėjimo pajėgumų stiprinimą visame rytiname flange. Taip pat būtina skubiai stiprinti Europos dronų gynybos iniciatyvą. Pastarųjų savaičių incidentai aiškiai parodė, kad Europa nebegali vėluoti reaguodama į naujo tipo grėsmes. Mums reikia modernių radarų, sensorių, perėmimo sistemų ir glaudaus regioninio koordinavimo. Nemažiau svarbi ir kritinės infrastruktūros apsauga. Energetikos tinklai, jungtys, ryšių sistemos, transporto infrastruktūra turi būti apsaugoti nuo hibridinių ir fizinių grėsmių. Tai yra visos Europos saugumo klausimas. Kalbėjomės ir apie būtinybę užtikrinti ilgalaikę ES paramą rytinio pasienio regionams naujoje daugiametinėje finansinėje perspektyvoje. Regionai, kurie šiandien yra Europos saugumo priešakinė linija, turi sulaukti adekvataus europinio dėmesio ir investicijų. Turi būti tinkamai atspindėta socialinė, demografinė, ekonominė dimensija šiuose regionuose. Taip pat būtina stiprinti Europos atsparumą dezinformacijai ir informacinėms operacijoms. Rusija sistemingai naudoja melą, manipulacijas ir bauginimą kaip informacinio karo priemonę. Todėl mūsų atsakas turi būti koordinuotas, technologinis ir ilgalaikis. Kartu aiškiai pabrėžiame, nebus saugios Europos be stiprios Ukrainos. Todėl turime ne mažinti, o didinti karinę, finansinę ir politinę paramą Ukrainai, bei išlaikyti maksimalų sankcijų spaudimą Rusijai ir jos karo mašinai. Lietuva savo ruožtu ir toliau nuosekliai stiprins nacionalinę gynybą, investuos į oro gynybos ir antidroninius pajėgumus, kritinės infrastruktūros apsaugą bei visuotinį pasirengimą. Tačiau šiandien turime būti visiškai atviri. Tai, kas vyksta prie rytinės sienos, yra ne tik Baltijos valstybių problema, tai visos ES saugumo išbandymas. Europa privalo parodyti, kad geba apginti savo sienas, savo piliečius ir laisvę, ir aš nebejoju, kad ji tai parodys. Ačiū.
Thank you, Mr. President. Now I'd like to invite...
Ačiū, ponė prezidentė. Dabar norėčiau suteikti žodį komisijos pirmininkai Ursulai von der Leyen pasakyti savo pareiškimą. Ačiū, gerbiamas prezidentė Nausėdė, prezidentė Kari, prezidentė Rinkevičiau. Labai ačiū už tai, kad pasitikote mus čia Vilniuje. Žmonės Baltijos šalyse patiria tai, kas daugelio manimo turėjo priklausyti praėjusiai epochai. Perspėjimai dėl oro pavojaus, žmonės bėgantis į priedangą, uždaromos mokyklos, ardomas transporto tinklas. Tai yra nauja tikrovė 2026 metais rytinėme pasienėme Europos Sąjungoje. Šiandien tai čia, rytoj kur nors kitur, palei Europos rytinį pasienį, ir mes turime aiškiai pasakyti, ką tai reiškia. Tai nėra pavieniai incidentai. Tai yra tyčinė Rusijos strategija, bandant destabilizuoti mūsų demokratinės visuomenės. Bet kaip ir Ukrainos mūšio lauke, Rusijai nepavyksta. Kaip ir anksčiau, kai ji pasinaudojo migrantais kaip ginklais ir stumė juos per sieną. Ir vėl noriu pagirti Baltijos šalių gyventojų atsparumą. Jūs reagavote ramiai ir atsakingai. Ir aiškiai pasiuntėte žinutę Rusijai. Mes laimėsime. Europa visiškai solidarizuojasi ir yra vieninga su Estija, Latvija ir Lietuva. Nes kai bandomos Baltijos šalys, bandoma visa Europa. Norėčiau šiek tiek nušviesti 4 temas. Pirmoji yra pasirengimas. Be reikšmingų nacionalinių pastangų, Baltijos šalis sulauks papildomų 12 milijardo eurų per SAFE programą. Jau pasirašėme SAFE planą su Lietuva ir esame pasirengę pasirašyti tokius planus.
We are investing right now in anti-drone capabilities, advanced air defense, and the protection of critical infrastructure. Besides that, we have already selected 16 new projects under the European Readiness flagships, from the Eastern Flank Watch to the European Air Shield. And I'm very glad to see Baltic companies contributing to these projects. Your cutting-edge expertise in cyber defense and counter-drone systems is instrumental for the whole of Europe. I also want to mention the role of cohesion policy. In our midterm review, we opened, actually for the first time ever, cohesion funds for defense-related expenditure. And thus we have redirected 1.5 billion euro across the Baltic states for defense preparedness, border surveillance and economic security. So basically, we have adapted our existing tools to the new realities on the ground, and we will follow the same approach in the next long-term budget. My second point is on the need to bridge our preparedness gaps. These incidents have exposed vulnerabilities. Preparedness must be the organizing principle for the resilience of our societies, our economic policies, and of course for our security architecture. And the Eastern member states will set the standards, because what you are experiencing today the rest of Europe could face tomorrow. So we will bridge the gaps systematically, starting with more unified alert systems and improved cross-border coordination. The Eastern Flank Watch flagship must become a central pillar of Europe's security architecture. We must also better connect national systems, for example with Copernicus and Galileo. It would allow better information sharing across borders and early warning capacity. We could initiate, of course in full coordination with NATO, a comprehensive assessment of existing counter-drone and early warning systems across the region, so that we can identify critical gaps together and then accelerate the support where it is most needed and fill these gaps. My third point is on integrating Ukraine into Europe's defence industrial strategy. It will complement our own European flagship air defence projects because Ukraine's battlefield experience is helping our own defence adaptation. It's in our strategic interest to deepen the coordination on next-generation defence technology so that we can produce more, we can produce better, and of course smarter. Our objective is very clear. Together, Europe and Ukraine must build the industrial capacity to out-innovate our adversaries. And finally, I would like to reflect together on a broader strategic lesson. Unfortunately today, hybrid and cyber attacks, foreign interference and disinformation are appearing regularly. Member States facing such threats should be able to count on European solidarity. And this is why I believe that Europe should develop a protocol for such hybrid situations. It would enable rapid mobilization of all available EU instruments, because after all, deterrence is the best strategy to preserve peace. So let's stay vigilant and let's stay united. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam President. Now let me invite the President of Estonia, Mr. Alar Karis, to begin. Mr. President, please.
Mr. President Nauseda, President von der Leyen, President Rinkevics, and dear journalists. The recent drone incidents in our region show clearly that the security situation on Europe's eastern flank remains serious and that Russia continues to pressure Europe's borders in different ways. As mentioned by Madam President, those are not isolated incidents. Together with migration pressure, border provocations and disinformation operations, these airspace violations are part of a broader pattern aimed at intimidating us, testing our readiness and creating uncertainty. Our response must be calm, coordinated and firm. Overblown narratives only undermine our resolve. At the same time, it is important to recognize that this is not only a regional issue. What happens in Europe's eastern borders concerns the security of the whole European Union and the alliance. Protecting Europe's eastern borders means protecting Europe as a whole. Therefore, the issue must be taken with all seriousness. Russia's aim is to increase pressure on us in order to weaken support for Ukraine. This is why the most important thing is to remain united, stay calm and continue supporting Ukraine politically, militarily, economically and diplomatically. Ukraine's right to self-defense is fully in line with international law and the UN Charter. As this is the external border and airspace of both NATO and the European Union, Estonia continues to invest in air defense, counter-drone capabilities and situation awareness together with our Baltic and Nordic partners. But strategies alone are not enough. We need faster and more concrete action. I am pleased that President von der Leyen joined us in this discussion today. European security is invisible and Europe's strength lies in unity. The urgent priority in strengthening multi-layered drone detection and air defense capabilities, European defense projects of common interest, especially Eastern Flank Watch, need to become a reality much faster. We count on increased EU support for this. At the same time, strengthening cooperation between the European and Ukrainian defense industries remain essential. Looking ahead, the needs of the Eastern Flank must also be reflected in the next European long-term budget. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. And now I would like to invite the President of Latvia, Edgars, to deliver his statement. Mr. President, welcome forward.
Thank you very much. And first of all, dear President Nauseda, dear Gitanas, thank you very much for your hospitality and also convening this meeting. Madam President, dear Ursula, thank you very much for your presence. And I think for us, this has been a very important show of solidarity. I want to thank the European Commission, the European Union, for very swift messaging of support and solidarity last week when Russia had baseless accusations against the Baltic states concerning the drone incidents. I think that shows that the European Union stands united, stands behind each and every member state. I would like to emphasize a couple of points. First of all, I think that it is important to understand that we are here and we are talking about many topics of resilience, topics of air defense, because of one reason. Russia attacked Ukraine. If Russia would not attack Ukraine, we wouldn't have such incidents here in the Baltic states. We wouldn't have those enormous efforts by Ukrainians fighting back aggression, but also by the European nations supporting Ukraine. But we also are witnessing that Russia is failing. Russia is becoming more desperate, and to some extent, Russia is also becoming more dangerous. We need to take that into account, and as my colleague President Karis just said, we need to address those challenges in a calm manner, but we also need to show firm and efficient response. So from this perspective, I think that it is very important that we are prepared for further disinformation campaigns, for further provocations, maybe also acts of sabotage. But we also need to take into account that the Baltic states are an integral part of the European Union and NATO. And I think that we are of the same opinion that any kind of such challenge will be met by firm response from each and every European member state by the European Union. As you already heard, we discussed a couple of very concrete measures that we need to take. Detection of drones, counter-drone capabilities, more efficient use of the existing mechanisms of the European Union. And the President of the Commission outlined all the instruments that are available, and I think that we are going to use them to the fullest extent possible. But we also need to take into account that we need to address, as President Nauseda said, concerns of people who are living in the eastern parts of our countries. And I think we also need to develop some more instruments to encourage economic life there, because each and every incident has some impact, that we need also to reassure people living there that we, as the national governments and also the European Union, take good care of those. My final point, the Baltic states have been very resilient. We have set targets and we were able to fulfill. A year and 3 months ago, we were exactly in this very hall when we were disconnecting from Brel and connecting to the European energy grid. So we were actually implementing the plan to become more independent when it comes to energy policy. I'm absolutely confident that we will be also able, with the help and with the coordination and cooperation with our very good friends in the European Commission and in the European Union member states, also we will be able to resolve the current challenges and we will become more resilient and much stronger. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now move on to questions from the media, so please come to the microphone, introduce yourself, and indicate clearly to whom your question is addressed. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. Gitanas Nauseda, Lithuanian national broadcaster. I have a double-sided question. The first part is for you, Madam President, and the second part is for you, gentlemen. So, regarding recent incursions in the Baltic countries' airspace, are there any plans for additional help, financial or any practical one, to strengthen air defense capabilities in the Baltics, and how to beat that, slow the bureaucracy? And for the second part, for the presidents, what happened recently on the Kaliningrad airspace? Was it another Russian propaganda show to shut down the airspace because of drones alert, or Ukraine somehow managed an attempt to strike? Thank you so much.
So on the first part of your question, what the funding is concerned, perhaps I divide it in two steps. First of all, the current funding that is now available, and then the funding that will be available with the next MFF. So let's look at the current funding. New is since a few weeks the 1.5 billion euros from cohesion plans, cohesion money, can now be invested in defense. Then, very new too, since 2 months, is the so-called East Invest Facility with 28 billion euros. This is specifically created for the eastern flank countries. And then the 12 billion euros from SAFE. This is all available. Important is now to implement it, to let the money work. That is the most important part. Then for the next long-term budget, the proposal of the Commission is to triple the investment in migration and border management, to increase by 5 times the investments in defense, and to have a 10-fold increase for military mobility. We are in negotiations for the long-term budget, but this is the proposal of the Commission.
I could comment on the Kaliningrad case. We would probably need to see it in a broader context. Recently, Ukraine long-distance drones reach very distant regions in Russia, causing fear in the society of Russia. However, this is an attempt to show that the war in Ukraine is not just military actions in Ukraine, but Russia, having started this war, can also receive certain response, and also to see this response in its own territory. So Kaliningrad here is just an issue of broader context, and I cannot say that whether it's Russia's propaganda or not, but such talks or rumors about actions in Kaliningrad, I have been hearing such talks since the beginning of May. I cannot say whether they are grounded or not, but I can say only one thing. Lithuania, as far as I know, Latvia and Estonia, their territories cannot be used for attacks against neighboring countries. This is our very firm principle, which is grounded in our attempt to protect our own people, because any drone that flies over our territories has not only to be detected, but also destroyed according to the possibilities. That's why we are talking about our weaknesses in our defenses and what we need to do ourselves and to do together with the European Commission, European Union and other states, so that these goals become a reality as soon as possible.
President Karis? Yes, please go ahead.
So only thing I can add, I mean, it's most of the drones, or not to say all the drones, came from Ukraine, and one of them was taken down by Romanian fighter coming from Lithuania. But of course, Kaliningrad is a concern. As far as I know, there is one of the biggest jamming systems set up in this region, and of course they are able to divert all the drones if necessary. So we have to work on counter-defense, and there are good examples. In Estonia there was a military exercise called Spring Storm, and we had experts from Ukraine as well teaching us how to take down those drones. So we are a bit behind, I agree, but still, I mean, I guess we do develop fast to be able to take them down in a cheaper way than it was happened by this Romanian jet.
Well, it's always great to be the youngest guy in this group because I have to respond a lot. Frankly, everything is already said, but let me just reiterate 2 points. Number one, what we are seeing, Russia is escalating its attacks against Ukrainian civilian infrastructure. Just a couple of days ago, we saw the very massive attack against Kyiv and also the region of Kyiv. The Ukrainian side has full right to respond, targeting military and economic targets. For obvious reasons, they are not sharing publicly or privately their operational plans. So I wouldn't be able to comment on your question directly, but one thing that I also want to reiterate, what President Nauseda said, Latvia, like Lithuania or Estonia, has not given any permission to use airspace or the territory for such attacks. That's what we have put as the kind of legal and also practical framework. So we are investigating each and every incident that we have seen, but I would not be able currently to comment from my side on a very specific issue that you have asked about yesterday's or early morning's incident.
Thank you. We have 2 more questions, so please, second one, go ahead.
Martin Kuda from Baltic News Service.
Louder, please. Louder.
Okay. I would like to dedicate a question for the President of European Commission. As United States seeks to lift the European Union sanctions for Belarusian fertilizers, and as representatives of Eastern member states of European Union are being called upon to do so, what is your view on the future of these sanctions? Would you consider initiating their suspension or lifting? And also another question for all the presidents, would you support allowing the use of the European Union multi-annual financial framework for defense needs? Thank you.
So to your first question, the sanctions have just been rolled over, and as long as the reasons which led to the imposition of the sanctions have not changed, I see no basis for lifting these sanctions.
Mr. President.
To answer the second part of your question, well, honestly, I would imagine that the security and defense are the priority in our upcoming multi-annual financial framework. This financial framework, its parameters have been agreed upon, therefore the possibilities to use funds do exist. There is no doubt about that. We are using that. The President mentioned the SAFE instrument, but in the future, both on the EU scale and in Lithuania, we are planning to spend much more, several times more, for defense purposes. And if we speak about the military mobility measures, they are going to be increased in the upcoming financial framework tenfold, which is quite a lot, I would say. So one may get the impression to what extent, in quantitative and qualitative terms, the EU's approach towards security and defense is changing. Therefore, my answer to your question is undoubtedly yes.
The same question to Madam von der Leyen. because we had a meeting back home with investors to the defense industry, and they asked the same question. And Madam Leyen said, we are moving in the right direction to lift this idea that it's not allowed to use this money to support either dual use or defense industry.
Well, just very briefly, yes, indeed, I think it's a high time to move from peacetime restrictions to the current situation. I think that European Union has been very good at helping Ukraine starting from 2022 when we were able to break a lot of taboos then. So I agree with my Baltic colleagues.
And final question, please.
Hello, my question is to Madam President. Europe is actively debating whether to appoint an envoy to begin direct talks with Putin. Angela Merkel, Mario Draghi are reportedly among candidates for those talks. Do you favor the possibility of appointing a European envoy to begin direct talks to Putin, and what would be the goal of those talks, and who would be the right person to take on that role? And for the presidents, do you have a united position on this issue as well?
So I'm certainly not going to speculate about any kind of names. I think important is no one wants more peace than the Ukrainian people. We should always keep that in mind. And if Russia stops its aggression, the war is over. And we as Europeans have always from day one on been ready to engage in a peaceful process without any question. What we see, and it has been described by the presidents also, is that Russia is showing at this point no willingness for peace. The bombardment of the last week can speak for themselves. And this is despite Russia losing a huge number of its young men for no territorial gains. And its economy is increasingly suffering from our biting sanctions. Actually, we are preparing right now the next package already. What is also interesting is that the Russian people are increasingly feeling the economic impact of the war on their daily lives. On the other hand, we see Ukraine. We just were able to finalize a 90 billion euro loan for Ukraine, which gives them certainty for the military capabilities to purchase and their budget for the next 2 years, so that they can negotiate from a position of strength. How in the very end the details is to be shown, but at this time I don't want to speculate about any names.
As a host, I will be polite and open and offer the floor to my colleagues.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. This is something I proposed back home some time ago, that we need to think about what's going to happen when this war is over in Ukraine, and what are the topics we are going to talk with Russia. And also propose that there should be somebody who is going to negotiate. Of course, I got punished. But at the same time, we do know that when this war is over, I'm not talking about Putin, I'm talking about Russia. Russia stayed next our doors, so we have to find a way how to deal with Russia after the war is over. But of course, Russia has to change, first of all. But we have to prepare, because we never know when our pressure to Russia is so good that they are able to come behind the table and start discussing. And we, as Europeans, should be ready, not starting discussion what we are going to talk, and a second, who is going to talk.
Well, I think that we all should remember the history that is only a couple of months old, when there were very intensive US-Russian, US-Ukrainian contacts. We had this kind of feeling that a lot of issues where the European Union is directly involved and where the so-called peace deal was discussed in a kind of spirit that EU is on the table but not at the table. I think that we had this kind of feeling and we had this kind of discussion that some of things were happening, let's say, behind our backs. And there was some concern. Now, seems that we are in a bit different phase. Seems that the Ukrainian armed forces, Ukraine is advancing, gaining some strategic momentum, and I think that is very important. Now, answering directly to your question, I would have a couple of counter-questions. Number one, what would be the subject or issues we want to discuss? Number two, is there going to be European Council mandate, or we have seen that sometimes individual member states are calling or talking, directly or via phone? Number three, who is going to be that person? A high-ranking head of state or government, or just appointed special envoy, the former politician or statesman or stateswoman. And then whether we are consulting and working closely with Ukraine, and whether Ukraine sees this as the real reason. Are those kind of questions and conditions right now there? I believe not. But at the same time, we also should not forget that Russia is very skillful. Every time when there is a reach out, this is a great PR kind of game for them. They get pictures, they get a lot of noise, and at the end of the day, we end up more or less with nothing. All those kind of elements need to be discussed. Are we going to move at some point to the diplomatic effort? I can't rule out anything because things are changing. Is this the right time? I doubt it. Is Russia ready? I doubt it. Whether we can reach kind of consensus within the European Union, I would say what I have seen, Russia always likes to negotiate with individual member states. Russia really hates EU or NATO as the collective force because then we are much stronger. They try to divide us. If we are able to reach out the common position on this issue, I think that Russia would actually lose the interest to negotiate. Let's see. Maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong.
Matot, suteikiau žodį savo kolegoms, dabar mažai ką, bet
I just gave the floor to my colleagues, and there is nothing much to add from my side, I think. But let me begin from a bit further. When we talk about the expansion of the EU, we have this merit-based approach, which is very good. Just like in this case, if we talk about countries which cause tension, a lot of security challenges across the region, and some of them start open war of aggression against its neighbor, in this case Russia against Ukraine, believing in the goodwill of these countries and starting debates or diplomatic efforts, I just of policy, because they were the ones that launched the aggression, and they are the ones that caused all the consequences we are talking right now in this broad context. So whenever somebody tells me that, well, we should improve relationships or warming up relationships with Belarus, or we should improve our relationships with Russia, I have a simple response. Give me grounds for that, or send me a signal that would show your goodwill. Again, goodwill and Russia in the same sentence, well, they don't really fit together, but doesn't matter. In this case, there are, well, or at least I don't see any signs of goodwill from Russia. If Oreshnik systems launch against Ukrainian territory is a sign of goodwill, or nuclear saber-rattling against the NATO, or attacks against Latvia, Well, sorry, we have a different understanding of goodwill. Therefore, discussions, negotiations, talks can only start when Russia would reach out for actual ceasefire, would end its aggression in Ukraine, and maybe then it would be appropriate to talk. But I think the worst option is to talk separately with 27 separate voices. There have been such efforts in the past. All of them were a failure. We can clearly state that. Therefore, I support one voice on behalf of all Europe.
Members of the delegation, journalists and others. Our press conference is over. Thank you.
Thank you.
To let all of us to expose ourselves.
No, the nice part was at the end you said almost everything you said what you said before.